How's it going, guys? Module number 8. Semester's moving right along. Kind of crazy. Seems to me like the other day we just started. This module is on workplace law and ethics, something I have to deal with on a daily basis. Strangely enough, it can be one of the most challenging things that administrators or leaders have to deal with, and it can be challenging for the individuals that are dealing with the issues related to law and ethics. So strap yourselves in and make sure that you pay attention because it's really important. I'm sure you know about ADA, FMLA, EEOA, COBRA, all that kind of good stuff. A lot of you probably heard of some of it. Hopefully some of it's new, so we'll review each one. Before we get into that, we have to talk a little bit about professionalism in the workplace. It's really key to be professional in the workplace. I really don't see anyone in this class that would be unprofessional, but you really need to treat everyone the same. That's regardless of their gender, color, religion, national origin, anything. That's really the basis of a lot of the rights that we have in the U.S. and something that we should really hold sacred. Discrimination is another thing that happens at times in the workplace that we're really trying to prevent within the United States. It's really important to treat your employees with respect. If you discriminate, you're going to more than likely be terminated from your position. And this is, the policy at Swedish, so that's where I work. So it's really important to do the right thing and to make sure you treat people in the right way, no matter what. Make sure you don't stereotype. You don't want to have a negative connotation toward a different generation or a population. Make sure you're not biased, and everyone should be aware that bias means unfair, dislike, or preference against someone. And then ethnocentric, kind of hard to pronounce, ethnocentric. There are people there that believe their background is greater than anyone else. And I'm not going to point out who that might be because that by itself would be pointing out a stereotype, but there are people in the world who believe they're better than others. But that's not something we allow in the workplace, and that's not something that we can have as leaders in the healthcare organization or healthcare field. So be aware of your coworkers and their beliefs. Although you don't have to know every last detail about what they believe in, make sure you're aware so you're able to address them in the right manner. There's some people that have to pray at certain times during the day. You want to make sure you're sensitive of their duties or their feelings. Try not to, make any jokes about ethnicity, and be open to differences that other people might have. Religion, that's really a key thing in society today. Certain religions, have different ideals, but the Civil Rights Act protects that. So in the workplace, we have to respect all religions. This can be any religion, even Christian. It's something that you have to deal with on a pretty regularly basis. But try to avoid your own bias. There might be religions that you disbelieve in or believe to be disproportionate to what the truth is, but that's not something that should come out in the workplace whatsoever. Effective and positive outcomes in the workplace come from effective hiring practices. I think this is really key. Posted, 7 ways to improve your hiring practices, and this was in 2017. I really recommend looking into that video. I have it linked to the course, and I think it's really, really interesting. Some of the things they talk about is making sure they fit in with your culture. Hiring for a culture is different than hiring just for a skill. So you want to make sure people are going to follow policies and procedures and make sure they do the right thing. So that's really a key thing. So take a look at that video. Really interesting. Oh man, this is really a struggle. Legal questions during an interview. I've had this happen numerous times. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has strict guidelines for the questions that you can ask during an interview. What do you think those questions might be? And I'll give you a second to think about it. I'm going to show you. Yale's website kind of highlights some legal questions. You can't ask about marital or family status, work visa status or citizenship, age, disability status, religion, arrest record. There's a way to ask arrest record, by the way. And there's a way to ask, there's a way to ask everything pretty much, but you really need to be careful. So here's a legal way to do it. Religion. Can you work on weekends? Of course you can ask if you can work on weekends, but you can't ask, what is your religion or are you practicing? That's really kind of standard. I'm going to just give you feedback. When it comes to hiring, don't even get near these. Don't even get near them, because you're going to accidentally ask something that you shouldn't. Keep it basic. Keep it simple. You can evaluate someone on an interview basis without having to ask questions related to religion or disability. There's a little bit of common sense there, so be careful with that. We've talked about federal regulations affecting medical practice and just disregard PT, but you put RAD in there as well. There's a lot of similarities, and each state has different laws, and the federal laws also comply with this. Equal Opportunity and Employment Discrimination, EEOC. You have employment at will concept, so this means if you're employed at will, you can be fired at any time. Title VII, of course, Civil Rights Act. It goes over a lot of different things. The Civil Rights Act of 1991, the EEOA, Equal Employment Opportunity Act, Pregnancy Discrimination Act, tons of them. I'm going to show you one thing really quickly. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, I really recommend you read it. There's a lot in here that plays into the everyday workplace issues. Here's some of the common concepts. It's unlawful to fail or reuse or discharge any individual otherwise to discriminate against an individual with respect to compensation terms, conditions, privileges of employment because of individuals' race, color, sex, religion, national origin. Lots of stuff in here. I would recommend you read it at least once. I've read it before. It's very lengthy. It's probably about 10 pages. But it really goes into key concepts of what you should and shouldn't know about employment. Employment at will, no contract. Employment can be terminated at any time, and this doesn't mean you can be terminated for a legal basis, but you can be terminated for a valid reason. I think Washington is at will, so of course that's disregarding if you work for a union. There are different union concepts that you have to play into. Title VII, we talked about the Civil Rights Act, the prohibit of discrimination, unfair treatment in employment based on race, color, religion, national origin, discrimination in patient care institutes that receive financial assistance. And Title VII also makes sexual harassment a form of unlawful discrimination. This was an amendment to Title VII in 1991. It includes wrongful discharge suits, and it also awards punitive or mistreated employees with damages in order to receive monetary damages, by the way. The EEOA of 1972, really interesting. You could sue employers in federal court on behalf of a certain class of people. So you've seen this quite a bit. If people are discriminated against based on employment for a certain organization, they can be sued, the organization that is, under the EEOA. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978, when someone becomes pregnant, you cannot release them from their work duties. That's why you see a lot of FMLA processes. You have to treat pregnant women as on-the-job employees and give them time to recoup and readjust back to their work life. You also cannot discriminate against age in employment. This was in 1967. Just because someone's over the age of 40 years doesn't mean they can't do the job. and this law kind of applies to anyone who deemed appropriate to have a job or work in a work environment. I don't really need to go into the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, but you can read over it. It's pretty interesting to see how all these acts comply, especially with those entities that are receiving federal funding. That federal funding can be put on hold, so it's really, really important to monitor this and make sure that we all do the right thing. The ADA of 1990, really a key component that you should know. It prohibits employers who have 15 or more employees from discriminating against people who are disabled. So this means hiring. You see a lot of questions related to the ADA when you fill out a job form or you're applying for a job. You usually ask if you have a disability, and it does that, so it makes sure most places to protect you. You can't be not regarded as a employee who could work at a certain level if you have a disability. That would be falling against the ADA, and the ADA is very strict on what organizations have to comply with. Here's basic accommodations. You have to have incline ramps, accessible elevator floor numbers, handicap accessible bathrooms, hallways with at least 36 inches of entrance or clearance. You have to accommodate wheelchairs, telephone adapters. There's a ton of stuff that you have to do to be ADA compliant for employees and potentially patients. OSHA, make sure you know what OSHA is. Running out of time. There's literally like 50 slides in this, but OSHA is really, really, really important. It protects workers against unsafe employment practices or unsafe environments. CLIA, if you have a CLIA, Clinical Laboratory Improvement Act, if you have a CLIA office on site, it requires laboratories to act in a certain manner. HMO, we talked about the HMO Act, of course. It has to do with healthcare and how healthcare is standardized in a managed care system. COBRA, we'll deal a little bit with this. COBRA is an insurance program that once you are removed from your current position, you are eligible to have COBRA. Organizations have to pay into COBRA. It can be quite costly for the individual, though, but you're able to, kind of display out your insurance until you're able to find another job, and that's what COBRA does. And it's been around for quite a while, but at least it protects you, even though it's costly. The Drug-Free Workplace of 1988. Of course, this is common sense. You cannot have drugs in the workplace, especially where employees are held accountable for their actions. There's a lot of other compensation and regulatory laws and benefits, Social Security Act, Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. This is what protects people from going on leave if a serious health condition happens, including pregnancy. Social Security Act we talked a little bit about in the past, but that's amount paid to a disabled person or a person who retires, because we all pay into it out of our paychecks on a bi-weekly usually basis. So hopefully we'll get that back one day. FLSA, FMLA is different than this. FLSA is Fair Labor Standards Act. You have to have a minimum wage, and this is mandated by federal law. A lot of states are raising minimum wage, which is different than the federal requirements. However, it still meets FLSA standards, and there's a lot of debate between what minimum wage should be. Unemployment. Of course, you have to have the rights to have unemployment compensation if you lose your job. The Equal Pay Act, this means that everyone should have equal pay regardless of gender, race, color, if they're able to do the same type of work. We're not going to go into that. That's really it that I wanted to review. There's quite a bit more slides because there's a lot of stuff in this chapter, but I try to keep my my lessons to 15 minutes or less. I think it's really important that you read over this slideshow. Make sure you know about this chapter as well, because you should know this when going into the workplace. Also, a lot of this will be on your test, and I try to review the highlights of that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks for everything, and have a good rest of the week.